Hi guys, welcome back to Codemaster Coach, your medical coding tutor. Today we're continuing our series on CPT, Evaluation and Management, and we're talking about medical decision making, which is the third must-have ingredient in our cheesecake that we're making. Again, if you have not yet viewed my two previous videos for CPT, Evaluation and Management, I've covered histories and I've covered exam. Go back and view those two videos so that we can continue this series. And today we're doing medical decision making. Okay guys, there are four basic kinds of medical decision making: straightforward, low complexity, moderate complexity, and high complexity. Medical decision making refers to the difficulty a physician has in establishing a diagnosis for the patient and or deciding what next to do for the patient. For example, should he treat the patient? Should he run more tests? The degree of difficulty involved will vary from case to case because some conditions are more difficult to diagnose than others. And one treatment may be better for one patient, but more difficult for another with the same diagnoses. So for this reason, the AMA, the American Medical Association, has specified three elements that need to be considered in selecting the kind of decision making that is rendered by the physician. Number one, the number of diagnoses or management options available to the physician. For example, does the patient have a lot or just a little to consider in arriving at a diagnosis for the patient? Number two is the amount and or complexity of the data to be reviewed. For example, is the patient having a variety of tests run that will need to be evaluated? Has the patient or another physician sent in data that needs to be reviewed? Okay. Or number three, the risk of complications and or serious injury or illness, which is morbidity, or death, which is mortality of the patient. For example, is there a chance that the patient will get sicker or even die if not treated immediately in a certain way? Do more tests need to be run to further narrow down the possibilities? And is there enough time to run these tests? So again, those three elements must be considered in decision making. All right, so what I've done here is I prepared a chart. So I want to show you a chart. Oh, I hope it picks up good. Okay. Notice this chart. Looking at the chart, you will see that going across the top, which is considered our x-axis, is listed the kinds of the decision making that can be made. So you have straightforward, low, moderate, and high. Okay? See all of those? Going down the page, the y-axis, you can see the different elements that need to be considered in order to make a final selection of the kind of decision. For example, I stated earlier, the number of diagnoses, the amount of data to be checked, and the risk of more serious illness or death. Okay? So in order to accurately select the kind of medical decision making, all three of the items found on your y-axis need to be considered individually. For example, let's say that your physician saw a patient with one diagnosis, very little data to be checked. Let me see if I can circle these off while I'm holding this camera. Had one diagnosis, very minimal, little data to be checked, and a minimal risk of more serious illness or death to the patient. Okay? So go on the chart, you'd mark each of these items by matching up closely as possible. One diagnosis with the word that most closely resembles, minimal. So you see I circled minimal. Number of diagnoses, minimal. Likewise, small amount of data to be checked. Word that most closely resembles it, minimal. And the low risk of morbidity and mortality could both, be closely resembled, minimal. Okay. So if you circled each of these terms on the chart, it would look like this. Minimal, minimal, minimal. So that tells you what your decision making is right there. Straightforward, because it came straight down under straightforward, right? The rules of CPT say that 2 of the 3 words that correspond to each of the elements, minimal, limited, and moderate, must be equaled or exceeded. For example, in order to qualify for straightforward decision making, the word minimal must be circled on the chart at least 2 out of the 3 times. Boom, boom, but we got it 3 out of 3. Think of this as you would when you learned about fractions. Remember when your teacher would ask you to look at the highest common denominator. Picking out the kind of medical decision making that's made is similar to that. You need to look for what word appears the most often, or is, in other words, what word have you at least met or exceeded 2 of the 3 times? All right, let's try another chart. Now on it, this is a linear chart. So on it, you will see the kind of medical decision making, and by charting the words minimal, limited or low, multiple or moderate, and extensive and high, next to the number of diagnoses, go across the top up here, number of diagnoses, okay, amount of data to be viewed, and the risk of complications and or morbidity and mortality, so I have risk, you can see which word, minimal, limited, multiple, or extensive, you met or exceeded 2 of the 3 times. So as you can see, at least for the first example, the word you met or exceeded in 3 of the 3 cases was what? Minimal. All right. Let's try another example. Let's say, this time I'm going to let you guys try to do this. Turn my book this way so it's a little longer. Should have done these in a landscape format. There we go, so I can get the whole chart on there. Okay. Another example, let's say that your physician saw someone who had 2 diagnoses. All right, 2 diagnoses. So see the word limited? Number of diagnoses, limited. A limited amount of data to be checked. Amount of data to be checked, limited. And minimal risk of complication. Okay. So from the chart, you can see that your physician has met. Let me find an ink pen. I'm going to do my pen. So he did limited, limited, and minimal. So from the chart, you can see that your physician met 2 elements needed for the low complexity decision making and has not met the level of risk complication category because we came in at minimal risk, remember? The rules say that 2 of 3 elements must be met or exceeded in order to qualify for a particular decision-making level. Your physician has met 2/3 criteria for low complexity medical decision making. So you would select low complexity from this chart. Okay? Because he came in limited, and minimal. And remember, you need 2 out of 3 to meet. All right, let's try one more. Another example would be if the patient has an extensive number of diagnoses. He's got hypertension, epilepsy, dementia, Alzheimer's, old age, mental retardation. See how I'm going on with these diagnoses? So see the word extensive for number of diagnoses. Let's go over here and mark extensive for the number of diagnoses. He had a moderate amount of data to be checked. Multiple lab work. Let's do moderate. Okay, now remember it says over here, amount of data to be checked. Let's go with moderate. Because he had lab work, multiple lab results, blood work, EKG, x-rays, etc. So we circled moderate. And a low risk of dying due to any treatment that was prescribed. So let's go under risk, low. Now look at your chart. We've got low, moderate, and extensive. Okay. In this case, the decision making would be considered moderate, right? Because it's based on the 2 out of 3 rule that I discussed with you earlier. Continue to play with these charts until you get the hang of it and truly feel comfortable with the 2 out of 3 rule. Okay? Okay, guys. I hope that made sense. The rule of thumb is we know the 4 different types of medical decision making. Okay? We understand the elements that are applied. 4 basic kinds of medical decision making: straightforward, low complexity, moderate complexity, and high complexity. And then the 3 elements: number of diagnoses, amount of data to be reviewed, and the risk of complication. And come up with you a chart. I actually found one, guys, in your CPT book. At the beginning of the E&M section. And let me show you, because I'm going to walk you through this. I had a subscriber say, will you give us examples? I will. Notice I'm in my CPT book, my new one, 2017. I'm at the beginning of my E&M. And notice there's something called, too much light in that area, evaluation and management tables. And you guys, look, there are charts just like, and see the medical decision making? But here's the histories and the exams. You check off medical decision making. And they've got them for different healthcare settings: office, initial, subsequent, observation, etc. Again, I'm a big one that tells you, love your code books, right? So again, love your code books. It's right in your code book. But these are some charts that I've found in an old book, and I really enjoyed. For teaching purposes, I found that the charts that I used for this video were the way that I grasped the information: 2 out of 3, 3 out of 3, etc. But remember, with medical decision making, the rule of thumb is 2 out of 3 of these components on your chart. Once you've got that, you got it, guys. All right. In my next video, I'm going to be talking about what role does time play in evaluation and management. Again, go back, view my videos. This stuff is going to start to sink in and make more sense. I promise. Just work with me and just study. Just stay in it. Just practice it and practice it. And it's going to start to make sense. It's going to all come together. But we're building our E&M code. Thanks, guys. I'll see you in the next one.